asking for what you want, having difficult conversations. When you have the courage to do that, the difference it can make in your life.
Welcome to Unleash Your True Value, a Breaking Money Silence podcast where professional women flip the script on self-doubt, ditch the discount mindset, and start owning their worth like the rock stars they are. Each episode is packed with real talk, practical tips, and the occasional mic drop to help you charge what you're worth and earn what you truly deserve. So buckle up, grab your coffee, because it's time to unleash your true value and make some noise while you're at it. Now, here's your host, Kathleen Burns Kingsbury.
Hello, and welcome to Unleash Your True Value. I am very excited about my guest today. Her name is Holly Buchanan, and she is someone that I met years ago, became aware of her work, was reacquainted with her in a networking group, I would say in the past 6 to 9 months. And the more we got talking, the more I said, she needs to come on the podcast. So I'm so glad that you were able to join us, Holly.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah. So let me tell everybody a little bit about your background because I know it, but I haven't shared it yet. So Holly is the owner of Buchanan Marketing, and she is a popular speaker, trainer, and author. She's authored several books. The one that I discovered her with was called Selling Financial Services to Women, What Men Need to Know, and Even Women Will Be Surprised to Learn, which was a great read when I was thinking about writing my first book called How to Give Financial Advice to Women. She's also the co-author of The Soccer Mom Myth, and she's always writing, currently working on a book that is really focused in on the topic of how people influence each other in terms of credibility and building trust. And so, Holly, what I love about her and what we were talking about right before we hit record was that she's big into researching. And so she's been researching over 2 decades how professionals win and lose trust so she can help them overcome blind spots, engage with their clients in a more authentic, real way, and also help them make decisions. So Holly, I just love that you're on the podcast today. I've already welcomed you, but welcome again.
Thank you so much.
Tell the listeners a little bit about why you've dedicated so much time to your focus area. What makes you passionate about it?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by trying to better understand people. Like, how do we make decisions? A lot of research on the different personality types. And what does the world look like from someone else's perspective? Like, I'm a huge reader. And the great thing about books is you get inside different people's minds and look at the experience through their eyes. And I just found that fascinating to know, like, why does someone, like, have you ever seen someone and they made a decision and you're like, how on earth could you have made that decision? Right?
Yes.
Or,
yes.
Why, what were you thinking? So it's just led to kind of a lifetime of just intense curiosity about people and why we make the decisions we make, and specifically how we win and lose trust and credibility. Because for professionals, we all have blind spots. Like I as with you, I work with a lot of financial advisors, and everyone has a story of, I had this client for a long time, did a great job for them. And one day out of the blue, they're like, oh, thank you so much. You were terrific. And I'm taking all my money and going to someone else.
Yes. Yep.
And they have no idea. They're like, what happened? So I'm very curious about those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly where some of our work aligns. I think it's really fascinating to help advisors and other professionals really become more emotionally aware or self-aware. And I think the good news when you're in a profession like we're in, we know we have blind spots, but we still have them.
Still have them. Yes.
So you answered part of the question. I know you work with financial advisors. Are there other groups of individuals that are professionals that you typically work with, or is it primarily in the finance world?
Primarily the finance world, but also women business owners. I came up to the marketing channel and specifically internet marketing, and I became very interested in the differences between men and women. Like when we looked at the data, we could see like the subject line that the most women clicked on was not the same subject line that the most men clicked on. And that, because I had that data, that hard data, I thought, this is fascinating. Like, what's going on there? So I also did a deep dive into that research. And because of that, like I'm especially passionate about helping women professionals. I also did a great deal of research on how men see women in the workplace because I couldn't find anything out there around that. Like the men are like, we're open books, we're easy. And I'm kind of like, no, actually, you have some unwritten rules and some preferences that women don't know about. So that's led to, I mean, I changed the way I do business based on what I learned, and I'm so much more successful because of it.
Can you give us a little example of how you've changed your business and how that's led to more success?
Yeah. So I know from my personality type, I like to give a lot of information because I want to receive a lot of information.
Yep.
And so with the internet company, like we had big Fortune 500 clients, and I'd have to give presentations to the CEOs. And my manager pulled me over and he said, Holly, I want you to do presentations more like Anthony. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like when I get like they get value from me. I deliver like a phone book, right? All this great information. I'm like, Anthony does like an 8-slide PowerPoint. Like, how can that? He's like, try it. So really distilled it down, hit the high points, didn't give all the background context. And guess what? Worked better. Like they're basically saying, give me the action steps.
Yep.
Whereas for me, and sometimes from women, we want more information. We want more background context. But like another thing I do is I know that I tend to give more information and sometimes go down a rabbit hole. So I'm aware of that. Like I noticed it. I was speaking at a wine entre femme event, which is women winemakers from all over the world.
Love that. How do
And
I get that speaking engagement?
like one of those, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. But there was a reporter there, and one of the women had just become the CEO of her family vineyard. And he said to her, so what qualifies you to be CEO? And she said, well, when I was a teenager, I started off on the Napa Valley train. And then I went to marketing for Mondavi. And I knew what she was doing. Like she's giving her whole background resume, basically. But she ended with, I've actually been doing the job for 4 or 5 years. And here are the results. And it's really just kind of in name only. But that male reporter's eyes just glossed over. Right. And I'm like, I wish she had just led with that. I act like she didn't have to give all that extra information.
Well, I also feel like it's a very gendered question of like what makes you
Yes.
qualified. I'm not sure way to ask the male CEO the exact same question in the exact same way,
Exactly
which
right.
is interesting.
But that's why we get defensive. And that's why, well, let me list all the, 57 reasons why I'm qualified, instead of just leading with here's the main reason.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk a lot about on the podcast, and certainly I do a lot of coaching around, is helping women specifically unleash their true value, identify their value. And that story makes me think of it. Her value is her results and a bunch of other things. And it's the way we speak about it and share it or don't share it. So I'm curious if you're willing to go there. Have you ever struggled around communicating your value, or is that something that you were just like, I'm good?
Always struggled with it. I have had a long history of undercharging clients in my speaking gigs. I actually had a client came back to me after I spoke at a conference. And interestingly, it was female organizers.
Yep.
And they said, you were so much more organized, so much better, and got such higher ratings. And you were priced way below. And we actually want to double your fee.
Oh, it's so good for them
So
that
I
they
was like,
taught. Yeah.
hey, thank you. But that was also a real aha moment for me. I was like, wow. And you know what else was really helpful was in our group sharing how much do you get for a speaking fee?
Yep.
I wish that, especially among women, like be that level of transparent, have that transparency, so
Yes.
you know what you should be charging.
Well, and what is interesting is, I feel like each of us, gender is one lens, but it's a lens that you and I focus a lot on. As women, we get certain messages about our value, about compensation. And I'm wondering for you, were there particular money messages that you received growing up, either from your family or from society, that led you to be, at least initially, an undercharger?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a twin sister, and we
Oh,
could
yep.
not have more different views on money. Like she grew up,
Fascinating.
yep, she said, the man is the plan. Going to marry a husband. It's my job to be the domestic goddess. It's his job to provide. I grew up the exact opposite. I grew up like I'm independent. I'm responsible for earning my own living. It's all on me. And in some ways that was good, but in some ways that was bad. Like I actually found a letter my father had written to me shortly after college, and I found it recently. And he said, I worry about you and your independence,
Huh.
that you're not going to reach out for help. And
Oh,
I was just like, wow, was he right about that? But yeah, so my message was live below your means, you know, earn enough, not go out there and earn a lot, earn just enough. And it took me a long time to try to move beyond that, those values that I learned growing up.
and did your mom work outside the home or did she work inside? Obviously you're working if you're a mother, but
Yeah, yeah. No, so dad was advertising guy in New York City. Mom had been a stewardess, one of the first ones in the jet age,
yep.
but she started her own travel agency business. And I learned that the good and bad of mom, and sorry, mom, but a lot of it was good, was that she provided a workplace for women. I mean, she was one of the first like telecommuting. They could come into the office in their own hours. And she was actually really good at business. But she downplayed the money part of it. She said, oh, well, the business, at least it provides us some free travel, as opposed to really owning this is a money maker. So again, that message I got was you work really hard, you take care of the people, but you don't really make a lot of money doing it.
So how did you, and maybe it took some time, maybe it's still a work in progress, but how did you, Holly, get over that? Because part of, certainly I've been there where I've been an under earner and had to push through and figure it out. But for you, kind of, was there a particular aha moment, or how did you kind of get to a place where you're like, no, whether it's my speaking, whether it's my writing, whatever it might be, my expertise is valuable?
Yeah, I have, and I call it a turning point story. Because I was in a coaching group and they're like, tell your turning point story. And I'm like, I don't have one. But when I really thought about it, it was a life changing moment for me. Working as a creative director of a group of radio stations. And there was a guru in the radio industry named Roy Williams, who was just famous and amazing. And the creative directors and copywriters and production people loved him. And I had all his books. Like everybody in the station knew I worshiped this guy. But one day I noticed that none of the salespeople are around. So I said to the receptionist, where is everybody? And she's like, oh, they're at the Roy Williams seminar. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And so the sales manager had brought in Roy Williams to do a presentation for the clients. Now I had the classic knee jerk reaction. Walked out of the building, and I'm walking around the lake in the office park, and I'm writing my resignation letter. You obviously don't value me. I can't believe you didn't even invite me. This whole thing. But I just had this moment and I just said to myself, Holly, what do you want? And I'm like, I want to see Roy Williams. And so I'm like, you know where he's speaking? It's in a hotel right up the street. I'm like, go at least catch the end of it. So I did. So I drove to the hotel, to the conference room, walk in. The sales manager was in the back. He saw me walk in and he got a funny look at his face and he saw my face. And I said, can we step out? And I said, why didn't you guys tell me Roy Williams was here? And like, he just blanched. He was like, oh my God, you didn't
Mhm.
get the invitation? So I'm so sorry. He's like, Holly, here's what I'm going to do. When Roy finishes here, I'm giving him a ride back to the airport. You're going to sit in the car. I'm going to shut up and you can have that time with him. So that's what we did. Roy contacted me about 2 months later. I'm doing a seminar in Palm Springs. I'd like you to come. Went to that. He said, hey, I want to introduce you to these two brothers who's run this internet company in New York, left radio, joined them. They were the ones who said, hey, we're going to get you into public speaking. Left there, started my own company. I mean, I would have missed out on this amazing life if I had made a different choice. But that choice was actually focusing on what do you want? And that just changed everything for me.
Well, it was not only just the what do you want, Holly, it was also the fact that you took action. You could have said what you wanted and gone back to your desk, but you decided you were going to take action and you were going to go even if you weren't welcome. And so kudos to you for taking action and deciding that you were valuable enough to be in that room.
Yeah.
That is a heartbreaking story, but also a really inspiring story all at the same time.
Yeah, it was. And like, look, it was an honest oversight. The manager did feel terrible, like it wasn't a purposeful oversight, but because of that, he let me ride in the car and talk to Roy.
So tell me, what advice would you have to women listening in based on not only your personal experience, but also on your experience and your research around gender differences and similarities? What advice would you have to them in terms of communicating your value or standing up for what you're worth? Because I know it's really still tricky. It may be tricky in a different way now, but it's still tricky.
Yeah, two pieces of advice. The one piece of advice is ask for what you want and ask for more. And even if it's not double, ask for some more. Like there was a situation, I really wanted a paddleboard and I needed a roof rack to carry it on my car. And so in my next speaking gig, I just added the price of the paddleboard and roof rack
to
the gig, and they didn't blink. And so moving forward, every speaking gig, I took my price and added, and I got that paddleboard back 20 times. But I really wanted it. So
let me jump in real quick, though, because the money psychology person in me is like, so do you think it's because it was for a specific thing that you valued that made it, I don't know if it made it easier or not, but to ask for the additional fee? Do you think it would have been different if you had just said, well, I want $2,000 more versus I'm going to add that $2,000 for that paddleboard?
Yeah, I think it was different from a psychological point because it was tangible.
Yeah.
Whether I got that 2,000 or not was the difference between whether I could get that paddleboard or not. So it made it tangible. And it also, it was that realization of if they say no, they say no. So yeah, I think the tangibility of it.
Yeah, interesting. So often I talk about negotiating compensation, and compensation just isn't finance, isn't just money. But I love that idea. I've never heard of thinking like, okay, so if I'm going to ask for X more, I'm going to put that in terms. For me, it would be like, well, I can go on that ski vacation. Mm-hmm. And it's figuring out what would motivate you. I have clients who actually will do that, but they do it for role modeling to the next generation. So it is interesting that as women, I think it's a really great technique. But as I'm processing this out loud with you, I'm thinking it's also like, why aren't you just worth $2,000 more, paddleboard or not?
Yeah. And I think for me, it wasn't necessarily a value. There was just something very specific I really wanted.
Yeah. And so you went for it.
And I went for it, yeah.
So what is the craziest thing you've ever done to land a job, whether that was back when you were in marketing or speaking?
Yeah, no, it was fairly recently. I do a course around handling conflict and having difficult conversations based on the Japanese martial art of Aikido. I've been studying the philosophy for like 15 years, but I actually took up the martial art. And so I gave this presentation, and it was a women's conference. And in it, I do a martial arts demonstration. I had, a person who was there with me to come up, and we actually do the martial art demonstration on stage. You throw a punch, I grab it, we do a little thing. And so I've been out to dinner, but I walked back into the hotel where the conference was, and the bar in the lobby, and a bunch of the women were there, and they're like, Holly, what was that move? Can you show us that move? So I'm like, yeah, sure. So here we are in the hotel lobby bar, and I'm doing the martial arts moves with the women. And I'm like, this is like the craziest thing, but it was so fun. But I got referrals from that, and other people invited me in to speak. They're like, hey, we heard about this great conferencing, and the martial arts part of it is so cool. So, yeah, just martial arts demonstrations in hotel lobby bars.
Well, and I love that you took, and maybe it wasn't a risk for you. For me, it would be a risk to kind of do something like that. That's so memorable and so useful, but it really resonated. And I love, having been a speaker for years, I love the idea of, sometimes after you get off stage, you're all by yourself. So the idea that people are like, Holly, show me that move. It's like a dream come true. Like, you really like me.
Yeah, it really, it was so much fun. No glasses were broken. Nobody was actually flipped to the ground. No one was harmed. So it was all
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. And do you still build that into the work that you do?
I do. I mean, the Aikido, I mean, I use it every day.
Tell me a little bit about what that philosophy is, because I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's the martial art was based on how can you diffuse an attack by ideally initially going with your opponent's momentum in order to diffuse the attack with no one getting hurt. And that's why it was so great for verbal confrontations. It isn't punch, block, kick, all this resistance. If someone throws a punch, you just turn and go in the same direction. So initially go with your opponent versus pushing against. And you see that philosophy everywhere. The Stoics, radical acceptance theory, Mel Robbins, the let them theory.
Yep.
All about initially go with your opponent. And so it's just an everyday part of my life. And it's made me more courageous because asking for what you want, having difficult conversations, when you have the courage to do that, the difference it can make in your life. I just didn't know how before, but now I know how. And is it still messy? Yes. Does it always work out? No. But I can honestly say there's no example of when I went in and had a difficult conversation that I was sorry that I had it.
Interesting. Well, what I love about that, and I teach a course on negotiation at a college here in Vermont, very part-time, but I do it. And one of the things I'm thinking about is when you're negotiating, the tendency often for the students is to come in, punching, like being very competitive, as opposed to really taking the time to understand. And I guess in some ways, tell me if I have this right, kind of go with where the other person's going to figure them out before you kind of start the negotiation.
Yeah. And it's some of that is knowing what punch is likely coming your way. Like I know with financial advisors, I'm not a financial advisor. And I know I've got a credibility issue around that. So I start off my sessions, or if I'm pitching myself, I say, I'm not a financial advisor. Like you all are the experts of what it looks like from your side of the desk. My expertise is what it looks like from the client side of the desk. I spend my time with your clients. All my research is with your clients. They are telling me things they are not telling you. But I do that because I want to get ahead of what is that objection and turn that into a positive. But I'm curious, how do you coach women on negotiating, and how do you manage that tightrope of a woman that you don't come across as pushy but still confident? Like what advice do you have?
Well, I think what is important, I think, is for women to really understand what their superpower is. I talk a lot about what their superpower is because we all have skills, we all have knowledge, and I'm not discounting those, but it's really, what is it that makes you unique, and how do you make somebody feel? Because people buy, and I'm speaking to you, so you know this, but people buy for emotional reasons. And so having them really think about that in concrete terms, and also in the groups, hearing it from other people, as well as their clients, I think is really important. I also think there's a way in which I coach people to be very collaborative in their negotiation. And whether we like it or not, that is the style that's going to be most successful for women. If you play hardball, like you think like old school sales guy, some men can still get away with that, but women can't. It's going to backfire. And you can either be upset about that, or you can feel like, okay, from an emotionally intelligent standpoint, I know this is a technique or a strategy that's going to make me most successful. And then I encourage women, and I think this is really important too, and it can apply to men as well, but typically a lot of women worry about when they lose a deal or it doesn't work out. And I actually talked to a client today where she's been thinking about it for a month. And I'm like, so how does it serve you to stay with what went wrong versus learning from it and moving and using it to do something, quote unquote, right? And so it's a lot of boosting people up, giving them the place and to practice the language and then to just learn. I don't care what anybody says, even master negotiators. It doesn't always go perfectly, and it certainly takes some time. So I love that image from your talk about kind of going with the punch. I may have to steal that and quote you
Please
on
do.
it because I think there, in some ways, we have to kind of go with what the reality is and what's out there. I'm curious. I have a couple other questions for you, but this one just popped into my head. One of the things I'm curious about is both you and I have talked a lot about, key gender differences or nuances in gender. And do you feel like there's pushback on that because it's so binary, it's so women versus men? Or do you feel like there's still a place for that? And I know that's a big question, so feel free to take it or not. But I'm really kind of curious because I struggle with that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's an important question because writing about the differences, and even I'm guilty of this, you go into stereotype land, and that's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to stereotype women, and it's not fair to stereotype men either. So I think you can talk in general about some of the differences, but I think the most important point is what is your blind spot? Whether it's women on how they come across to men or men on how they come across to women, just to have that self-awareness to get that feedback. I mean, as a speaker, I always ask for feedback and I give them permission. I said the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Like I always want to be better, and I'm so close to the material. I don't always know how I'm coming across. So I think the main takeaway is simply to acknowledge there are differences. I mean, and it's not just gender, it's personality type, it's
Right.
race. I mean, it's a lot of different things.
Well, that's how I've handled it. I've talked a lot about gender and then broadening it out to being there's a bunch of different lenses in which we view the world. And it's being aware of those different lenses. And also, you're right. A lot of if just the basis of research is it's generalizations. So I think that's kind of what I do. And it's just been an interesting time when we talk about empowering women and helping male allies, and that this is based on research, but it's also kind of this moving target with the younger generations and how people are thinking about things differently. So thank you for answering that. I'm curious for the people listening in, primarily women and the financial advisors who want to work more effectively with professional women. What's one tip you have for them on just anything, like just as a woman in business who's gone through a lot, who shared a little bit of her story? What's a tip you want to leave people with?
I would say this, that usually if a woman loses a sale, it's a credibility issue. If a man loses a sale, it's usually a trust issue. And again, in general, right? I don't mean to stereotype, but in general. So for women, my tip is get really good at explaining basically what is it you call it the superpower.
Yeah.
But what is the unique thing that you bring to the table? And also, what is the number one objection? How can you get in front of that? But and this is true of all financial professionals. I find that in general, they don't do a good job of really explaining why me.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about unique value propositions, and they're actually kind of difficult to come up with. So I would just say, what is the number one thing you can do to gain credibility? And by the way, a lot of times it's about overcoming a stereotype. I had a woman who was a female financial advisor, and she had a couple and thought she did a great job with them, an elderly couple, but they ended up going with a different advisor. But 8 months later, the husband had a heart attack and died.
Oh,
and the
yeah.
wife picked up all the money and moved it to this woman advisor. So clearly she did a great job of connecting with the woman, but not the man. And so when we looked at her process, I just said, what do you talk about? But I said, you're facing the stereotype of a man. What came out from our discussion is she had been in the military and her job was to repair military helicopters. So I just said,
throw that out there.
Yeah, you know, like the pictures behind your desk. Do you just have a picture of like a really cool military helicopter? It's just like, I'm like, put it up there. Tell that story. It's just like, what does that have to do with being a financial advisor? And I'm like, nothing. But I guarantee you, men are going to stand up and say, oh, cool helicopter. Tell me, wow, I didn't expect that. So sometimes for women, it's just like break through the stereotypes. What is something that someone would be surprised to know about you?
I love that. I love that. I think I do that with mountain biking and skiing, but I don't do it consciously.
Like, what do you do to kind of break through a stereotype? Is there a story or a picture you point to?
Well, often, I mean, historically, I'd be mountain biking with the guys and skiing with the guys. Now that I live in Vermont, I'm happy to report I'm in a community where it's mixed. So it depends on the day and who's available. But there is a way in which building in stories, and I think I consciously do this when I'm talking to an audience that's 85% male, financial advisors, building that into the conversation. But just to highlight the tip is for women to really focus on credibility, for men to focus on trust. I feel like that could be a podcast unto itself. I want to ask you one more quick question, then have people learn a little bit about how they can connect with you, because I'm sure they're going to want to hear more or check out your books and your upcoming book. But finish this sentence, Holly, with whatever comes to mind. Dare to be.
I would change it slightly and come back to dare to ask for what you want.
Love that. Only an empowered woman changes the question. So kudos to you. I love that. So tell us where we can find out more information about your work, if we wanted to hire you to speak or check out your books.
Yeah, so it's hollybuchanan.com. So it's HOLLY, B as in boy, UCHANAN.com. Or just Google Holly Buchanan and it's me. And like there's one other Holly Buchanan who like ranks higher than me. I'm like, damn it.
Well, we'll put that link in the show notes. Any other information you want to put out there before we end today?
No, I love talking with you. I feel like I learn a little something from you every time we talk. So I so appreciate our time together.
Thank you, Holly. And I have loved Breaking Money Silence with you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Unleash Your True Value. I hope you're feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to own your worth unapologetically. Remember, your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to embrace it, amplify it, and let the world know exactly what you bring to the table. If you're ready to take things even further, you don't have to do it alone. As a money mindset and business coach, Kathleen specializes in helping professional women like you rewrite their money stories, step fully into their power, and take their businesses to the next level. Visit kbkwealthconnection.com to set up a free coaching discovery call. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and leave us a 5-star review. Until next time, ditch that discount mindset and unleash your true value like the rock star you are.